Hello. In this video I'll be doing a short demo of some of the features of masking and layers within the ON1 Photo Raw product. I'm sure all of the things I'm about to show can also be done in other editing tools such as Photoshop, etc. But I'm familiar with the ON1, so I'll be doing it there. First of all, it's worth discussing briefly what layers really are. If you think of a sheet of paper, or more accurately, a sheet of clear acetate or clear plastic that has an image on it, if you have multiple such sheets, you can think of each sheet as a layer. So here, for example, I'm going to bring in this one image. You can see it's right here, Rainier After Dark, and that will be brought into ON1 as the first layer. And in fact, you can see there'll be a developing list of layers over here. I don't know if you can see where my mouse cursor is, but right now you see that there is a single layer there, and the image that's on that clear acetate is here, this picture of the mountain and sky and so on. So in a conventional sense, you could certainly go ahead and edit this one image, and that would be fine. You know, if that suited your particular needs, you could do some masking, and we're going to talk about masking in a minute, and adjust brightness, contrast, etc. And we certainly will be doing some of that. But this video is more about what happens when you begin to combine images or use multiple layers, or that allow you to do something to a layer which will affect only that layer, and the underlying layers will remain visible wherever there's a mask or a clear area in a layer above. Now, one thing I should mention is that the list of layers over here are in a particular order. And what that means is that any layer that's at the top of the list is as if it's a piece of, as I said, acetate or clear material that's on the top of the stack. Anything below it is below that, and then below and below, and so on as you go down the list of layers. So let's make it a little more obvious. I will bring in a second image. Now, one thing I want to make sure you're clear on is that this canvas, the canvas is the entire graphic working area. It is of a particular size, usually of a certain number of pixels by a certain number of pixels, and that size of the canvas in this product, that's probably true elsewhere, is set by the dimensions, the pixel dimensions of the first image you bring in. You can change the canvas size, and there are tools here. I'm not going to be doing that, but know that you can adjust the canvas size. So I'll go over here. You see there's a little plus sign here. I'm going to click on that and bring in a second image. It's this odd looking piece of metal. I'll click on it, and it comes in, and now anytime you bring in a new image, it's automatically put on the top as the top layer, and it's opaque. Because it's opaque, it wherever it is. Now notice that this new image isn't as large as the one that I originally brought in. Using the transform tool here, way over on the left, if I click on the transform tool, I can move this around, and wherever it exists, because it is opaque, it will obscure your ability to see the underlying mountain. It may seem like an odd pair of pictures to put together, but you'll see in a moment why I've chosen that. So here we are. We have two layers. We have this metal thing as the top layer and the mountain scene as the bottom. If I were to go over here to the layer list and click on the mountain and drag it up, I can make it the top layer. And you might think, okay, well, what happened? The metal thing is gone. Well, no, it's actually underneath the mountain layer. And because the mountain layer is fully opaque and has no mask on it at this point, you can't see it. I could temporarily disable or hide. You can hide any layer you want or any combination of layers. If I hide the mountain layer, you will see, which I just did by clicking on this little dot over here, you can see the metal layer down below because I've now hidden from view. One thing I would point out, if you see this looks like a gray checkerboard pattern, that tells you that that area is transparent. There's nothing there, so whatever was happened to be below would be visible. It would show through, again, like you had a clear thing on top of an opaque thing. So I'm going to bring back the mountain layer, turn it back on, and I'm going to drag the bottom layer back up to the top, which I just did, and again I can move it around. Incidentally, I can also size this layer. If I grab one of the corners, I can distort it in any way I like. I'll leave it more or less so there's a circular attribute of that center part. You can also, by the way, rotate. You can see you can change the orientation. The way I've done that here is by moving the mouse down to below. I think you can do it to the side as well. If you look at the mouse, it changes appearance. The cursor, changes appearance. Looks like a little circle with an arrow on it, and that tells you that if I click and drag now, it will be rotating the this layer, the image that's on this layer. So let's talk briefly about masking. A mask is a way to include or exclude a portion of an image. And when I'm doing layering, that's very useful, because what I'd like to do here is to include all of this circular plate, but exclude everything around it. And I'll do that right now. I'm going to go over here. Over on the left, there's what's called a masking brush. But instead of using a brush, I'm going to go up to the upper left here, click down, and I'm going to do a quick mask AI brush. Now this is a AI, artificial intelligence feature, which is in ON1. Click on that. It will analyze the image to see what's there. And now as I move around, you'll see that you see this blue highlighting that takes place. I'm just moving my mouse around, not clicking on anything, that I can tell it I'm interested in one or more features. Now the feature I want to keep happens to be this circular thing in the middle. You got to watch out, some blue may show up elsewhere. Blue is whatever will be included in the mask. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to say OK over here in the upper right. And now what it's done is to mask away all of that, the outer region around the circular feature. And because I've done so, in effect what I've done is to tell ON1 that that thing that I'm masking away is to be transparent. Well, sure enough, here it is, and I made it transparent. I can, by the way, click on this down at the bottom to show me the mask, and you'll see that, well, first of all, there's a region out here. Remember, I mentioned that this checkerboard is where there's no image. Um, However, here is the mask. White is include, black is exclude. So white is the included area, black is what will be turned transparent. So I'll turn that off, and yeah, they agree with each other, of course. By the way, I can go back into this, and I believe I can push Control I to reverse the mask. So you can see I can change it from black in the middle to white in the middle. And let's go back to the image and you'll see what effect that has here. I'll do Control and there you see by inverting the mask, that's what the term is, invert, it gets rid of everything in the middle and keeps the stuff around the edge. I'll invert again, and there it is. If I go to now, keep in mind that I'm working on a given layer. At any time, you're working on a single layer, working as in editing, masking, adjusting, sizing, whatever it is. And it's kind of hard to tell a little bit, but if you can see that there over here on the right, there's a slightly lighter gray to indicate that that is the currently selected layer. If I click on the second one, that becomes the layer that I would be working on. I'm not going to do that quite yet, but I wanted you to see that you choose which layer to work on, and it will work on just that layer. So I'm back at this metal plate layer. I'll go over to the transform tool here over on the left, and once again I'm going to size it. Now if I hold the shift key on the keyboard, which I'm pushing right now, as I size it, it will keep the same aspect ratio. See how it, I can drag left or right, up and down. It doesn't matter. It will keep the same aspect ratio. So let's say that that's the size of the thing I want. It looks like, well, the whole thing is, I'm making a kind of a fake planet up there. We're now on another planet. There we go. I can also move this, and I can, as I showed before, I can rotate it in any fashion I like. Let's leave it about there. So if you were happy with that result, there's an edited picture that you can save and print, but there's one more thing I want to do to this before I conclude. I want to do some shading on this supposed planet now. I want to darken the right edge. I also want to do some adjusting on the color. Why don't we do the color adjustment first? Now, let me point out over here on the right, you see this menu here, develop and local are the two that I'm most interested in right now. If I'm in the develop tab, there's a bunch of tools down below. The one I'm going to be working with is tone and color. So everything in the develop tab affects the entire layer. Now, yes, I can choose areas of that layer to work on, but if I were to go to, for example, tone or color, I'll scroll down a little bit to see where the color controls are. So if I grab the saturation slider, I can make this thing go from highly colored to black and white. I think I'm going to tend toward black and white, but not completely. I'll also go up to the temperature slider and make it a cooler look. Since I'm in develop, I can also, in the tone and color, I can make it brighter. I want this moon to be a little bit brighter, and there you go. Now if this was the image as you wanted it to be, you could stop here. However, I think I want to have more of a shaded lighting on the moon, or I'll call this moon, and that would not be done in the develop tab, because as I showed, the develop tab affects the entire image. Instead, what I want to add is what's called a gradient mask or gradient shading. So I'll go over to the local tab and add an adjustment. click on Add Adjustment, and now if I were to simply proceed from here, if I drag my mouse and click around, you'll see that I can do, using a brush, I can I'll make it darker so you can see what I'm doing. See, I've just dragged the mouse twice, one to the right and then to the left, and you can see the mask that I did. Certainly not what I want, but I wanted you to see that there are different ways of doing your masking for purposes of this local adjustment, other than this simple dragging a marker around. Let's undo that. I'm going to undo Control Z and go back, and instead I'm going to do a gradient mask. Gradient mask. I've clicked on notice I was upper left, clicked on gradient mask up here in the left corner, and if I drop this gradient mask right on the center of this moon, you'll see that we're already getting some shading. In fact, I can adjust the amount of shading with the exposure slider. This is again, keep in mind, this is in the local tab. So if I drag this, I can shade it, but let's say I don't want that particular angle. I can even change the location. Let's talk briefly about the gradient mask on-screen controls. There's this center circle and a circle out on the right or on the side of it. It could be on the left as well. And if I drag that outer circle, I can change the orientation of the gradient mask. I can change the size. It can feather out more, or it can be more sharply defined. Here it's perfectly sharply defined, like a sharp edge. Maybe I'll go to about here. And I will change the exposure to make it even a little bit darker. Actually, this looks like how I wanted it. So I will stop here. Let's go back to the drag, get away from the masking tool, and look at it a bit. I'm still in that local adjustment, and I can still do things to it without even having to see the gradient mask itself. If I want to go back to the gradient mask, I can simply go back to the tool, and there it is. If I can change it. This is non-destructive, so I can change it any way I like, any time I like. Incidentally, there's one more aspect of the gradient tool that you can adjust. I've already shown how to change the angle and the feathering. I can also change the location. If I click on the center dot, notice I can move the position, the center position of the gradient tool. I'll leave it back on the middle of the moon, but I didn't want to leave that aspect undescribed. Okay, now that we've got the moon looking how we want it, let's do a little bit of work on the mountain. I want the apparent appearance of the light, the source of light, to be upper left. Now if I were to go to, first of all, I need to click on the mountain layer, which is the second one on the list, and if I were to go to the Develop tab, I could change the exposure of the entire layer, but that would not achieve in any way what I'm trying to do, which is to make the, let's say, the upper left area of the mountain lighter than the rest of the image. So I'm going to undo that. I'll double click on exposure, set it back to normal, and here's where we get into a little bit more layer related work. If I were to create, if I go into local as I did before and create a gradient mask, which is I think the tool I want, it would affect the entire image. So if I laid a gradient down here and then worked with it, it would affect the sky as well as the mountain. One good way of controlling the brightness and whatever of a specific region of an image is to create a duplicate layer, mask out the things that you want to control or ignore. And so I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to go up to this Rainier After Dark layer, and you see there's these 3 bars on the right. I'm going to duplicate the layer. And there I am. I have 2 layers. They're identical right now. And that's okay. What I'm going to do is to create a mask on the upper of the 2 so that everything but the mountains will show through, and I'm going to influence just the mountains. So I'll go back to my masking tool, and I'll go to the Quick Mask AI brush, and I'm going to select the mountains. Now notice the area over on the right didn't get selected. I could manually work on it. Let's say if I click here, notice it didn't do the whole thing. I click and then I can click again, or I can simply use a sizing box, which I'm dragging now, and it will select the entire mountain area, and it will create that mask. Much as we did for the moon, we're creating a mask for the mountains on the layer, this second layer, the duplicated layer. So I'll accept that, and let's see what the masking did. And there it is. The mountains are white, so that they're opaque, and everything but is black. I'll go back to it. Everything else is black. So if I were to, for example, go to the Develop tab, if I change the exposure, notice it changes only the brightness or darkness of what I had masked out, and what's showing through. I'll hide the bottom layer, and you can see what's going on. If I hide the bottom layer, you can see, well, we see the top layer. I can even hide that. So in effect now, the only layer visible is this new one, the one that I created, the mask on the mountain, and I can control the exposure. Everything out here in this gray checker box, or checker appearance, is transparent. So let's bring things back. I'm going to bring back the moon, bring back the underlying, the original, if you will, of the mountain, but I don't want a consistent brightness. I want to do, much like I did for the moon, I want to do a gradient mask for the brightness or the lighting on that mountain. So let's go, we're still in Develop. I'm going to reset the exposure, and I'll go over to the Local tab. I'm going to add an adjustment just like I did before. I'll go up and select the gradient mask. I'll lay one on here, and interesting, it's now set to darken a certain portion of it, and if I drag this, now notice it's influencing the bottom. Well, that tells me that the mask isn't yet oriented the way it ought to be. I'll set it for a brightening appearance about there, and I'll drag the angular control to pivot it around so that the light appears to be coming from the upper left. Now that's a little too sharply defined for what I want to achieve. I'm going to spread it out a little bit so that it looks a little more natural, and there you go. There is the mountains with apparent light coming from the upper left. It is consistent with the lighting on the moon, and it's making the image look, I don't know what to say, believable, but a little more believable, at least from a lighting point of view. Now while I'm in here, I'm going to click on the bottom layer. I'm going to show you one more method of adjustment. These adjustments are going to be using an AI tool. So I'll click, notice I'm over here on the right, click on the bottom layer, which is the original, and again go back into my super select, and I'm going to highlight the clouds, right click, add an adjustment. See at the top of the menu up here is adjustment. And I'm going to influence the exposure of that, bring it up a little bit. I don't want it crazy white, but a little whiter than it was. That's fine. Now let's add one more adjustment. We're going to work on the trees at the bottom of the image. Notice that they're kind of dark, have a slight bit of color to them. Let's use our AI tool, the Super Select tool, one more time. And observe that now that I've selected that tool, as I move around, it's not really selecting the entire thing. I can almost kind of get it. The best way, as I did before, is to create this bounding box, which includes all of the area in question. I'll right click on it, add the adjustment, and it goes over to local. Now I have this masked area at the bottom. As a point of interest, initially when you do this, it assumes what you want to do is to darken it. Not really what I want. In fact, I can lighten it, can bring back some of the detail, but what I really don't want is a whole bunch of color in there. So I'm going to go down, scroll down here to the bottom, and get rid of the saturation. I can go completely to black and white, but let's leave a little bit of color, but not as much as was there before. This might be a little brighter than I need. Let me bring the exposure down a bit. And I'm going to stop right about there. That looks good to my eye. It's not muddy looking, but it doesn't overtake the image. So here we are with a workable image. Let's proceed now to do a different moon. You may like this moon, and that's fine. You could stop here. I'm going to do a different kind of moon altogether, and it will be demonstrating some tools that I haven't shown yet. So I'm going to hide. I don't have to delete it. This is totally non-destructive. I'm going to simply hide that top layer, and the moon goes away. Let's proceed to now to do a different moon using a different source image, and you might be surprised where it comes from, but let's see if you like the net effect. So as we did before, I'm going to add a layer, and the layer is going to come from, believe it or not, this drain. So I'll click on the drain and add it to the top. As a matter of fact, let's have it go to the very top. Right now it's sort of down in the middle. Let's go up to the top of the thing. So it's now sitting on top of this stack, and we'll go to our transform tool and move it to a position. I know this doesn't look like a moon yet, but give me a moment. You might like what's about to happen. This, by the way, is a drain that's over at the located near the Worcester Art Museum. We happened to be there yesterday. What we need to do is to mask out all this stuff and leave only this interesting dark and rusty center. So we are going to create a mask, but we're going to do a different kind of mask. It's a circular, it can be elliptical, but it's centered on a particular point. So we'll go over here to our mask tool and create a gradient mask. Oh, we're on the wrong tool. Let's go to the right tool. Alright, now we're on the mask tool. We're going to create a gradient mask, but it's not shaped gradient, it's shaped center. That's the type. And I'll drop it right on there. Now you say, wow, that is totally useless. Well, it is kind of. But you notice what's happening is that it's getting rid of the area in the middle. I can change the shape. Look, I can change the shape and size. I can move the position around, but it's getting rid of the interesting thing instead of including it. There happens to be a keyboard shortcut, however, which is wonderful. I think I used it earlier, Control I, to invert the mask, to do it using the keyboard. And let's drag the size down. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. I want to see exactly what I'm doing. I'll scroll over, move over. Let's get to where it belongs. I can zoom out a little bit. Let's work right there. All right, so we'll drag the inner edge. We probably want to move our center up a little bit. Try to make it right in the center of that hole. And I'll drag my top and bottom, and I'll drag my left and right. Let's actually get the left and right here. Sometimes it fights you a little bit. There we go. I'm going to drag that in, make it kind of circular, get my position just right. And now this is the feathering area, just like we had before. I do want a sharply defined feather. And I'm going to stop right at the edge, right about, let me get it to match up right there. Isn't that interesting? Suddenly it's starting to look like a planet. I'll use my transform tool to rotate things around a little bit, and I'll get the lighted area. Let's move it up. I'll get the lighted area. Remember, I can use that, and now, isn't that interesting? I think I want to stretch it a little bit left and right, make it a little more round. I can move it in position, and I can shrink it too. Let's zoom back out again. It's a little bigger than what I had in mind, so I'll do Shift, drag a corner, make it a little bit smaller, position it one more time, and lo and behold, here's another planet. Totally different appearance. I'll go to notice I'm in that layer, so anything I do from a develop point of view would be to that entire layer, which is what I want in this case. And I'm going to get rid of a lot of that color. I don't want that brown color. I want to get rid of the saturation, make it look more normal, and in fact go a little cooler with the color, like so, using the temperature slider. So I change the saturation and the temperature, and I want it a bit brighter. So I'm going to bring the exposure up. Now if I go crazy, it gets too bright. Let's find a happy medium right about there, and I think I want to change the angle a little bit more. So I'll go back to I'm still in my transform tool. I'll change it to have the lighting coming more from the upper left, move the thing up a little bit, and now if you look at it, hey, that's quite a different moon. Maybe you like this one better. Also notice I didn't have to redo any of the mountain or cloud or the thing at the bottom. Those were retained. And in fact, I'll show you how I can go back and forth. I'm going to hide that new layer, bring back the original one, and you can decide which one you like better. And because it's non-destructive, you can even have two of these planets. Which one am I on? I'm not even sure. Let's see. Yeah, I can still drag that one. I can have two planets in the periphery, or just the one, whichever I choose. So I can get rid of one, hide one, and make the image exactly as I want it to be. That is the end of this demo. I hope you enjoyed it, and I do hope that you start to use tools, layers in particular, because you can see how rich it is in terms of creative freedom. Thank you.